In this video, you'll be learning 4 essential concepts in understanding the Hermetic Qabbalah. So whether you're an aspiring ceremonial magician, an esoteric tarot reader, or just a mystical misfit like me, hopscotching the tree of life and trying to understand the only thing that there truly is to understand, pure being. This video is going to give you some really great foundational concepts to progress in your esoteric study. Each concept I'm going to talk about will build on the previous concepts, and so they will get a little bit more complex as we go, a little bit more mystically inclined, and a little bit more heretical. So I definitely recommend starting at the beginning and maybe playing certain things back and then going at your own pace. I do have many other videos explaining the technical aspect of this study, so if you're interested in those, I will leave the links in the description. Let's jump in the wormhole. So the first key thing to understand is the idea of emanation. Emanation just means something coming out of something else. And if you know one thing about mysticism, it's that it is the inquiry into how this reality came out of another reality. And it's kind of drawing maps back to that original reality. Emanation was a popular idea before the Common Era. I don't know who first branded it. I don't know who was the OG emanation theorist, but I do know it has influences from Pythagoras, Plato, the Hermetic tradition, and it was eventually popularized by Philo Judaeus. Philo was a brilliant Jewish mystic and philosopher, and I'll just read you his words. He says that God is above place and time. He is contained by nothing but transcends all. But through transcending what he has made, nonetheless, he filled the universe with himself. So in the sense, God emanates himself into the universe that we experience. Philo goes on to say, "He who is escaping from God flees to himself. He who escapes from his own mind flees to the mind of the universe, confessing that all things of the human mind are vain and unreal and attributing everything to God." Notice how Philo describes God and the whole universe as a large mind. This is very characteristic of the Hermetic tradition and is echoed in the much more contemporary book, the Kybalion. The first principle that the Kybalion mentions is mentalism, the idea that all is mind, that the universe is one big mind. The idea here is that we, in a sense, are merely some really cool ideas of this large divine mind. But what's cool is we ourselves have a mind with our own ideas. So one could say that we are the God of our own ideas as we construct our own subjective worlds and reality tunnels, what I like to call the subjective YO universe. You see how we're starting to near the idea of correspondences, as above, so below. We'll get to that later. This idea of emanation, one thing becoming something else, or one thing becoming a less pure version of itself, was developed by the Neoplatonists. One such Neoplatonist was Plotinus, who said that there's one identical soul, every separate manifestation being that soul complete. The differentiated souls issue from the unity and strike out here and there, but are united at the source. Much as light is a divided thing on earth, shining in this house and that, and yet remains one. One soul is the source of all souls. It is at once divided and undivided. The souls are apart without partition. They are no more hedged off by boundaries than are the multiple items of knowledge in one mind. Notice how Plotinus also compares us to ideas of a mind. This is going to come in handy when we look at our third and fourth point. These ideas are very reminiscent of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. If you want more information on that Hermetic catchphrase, I made a whole video on it. I'll put the link in the description. The general idea is that what is above, what is macrocosmic, what is the large, full picture of cosmos, being, and consciousness is very similar to what is below, what is immediate, what is particular, and what is happening on this very scale of reality. Me, you, this world, this YouTube video, this moment. And it is the process of emanation through which the above becomes the below, or maybe realizes the below. Or if you really want to get deep, realizes itself because of the below. But again, that's in my other video. So emanation is all about becoming. And now I'm going to talk about how to really use this information and this lens while you're studying Hermetic Qabbalah and related topics. Everything in Kabbalah and in some ways mysticism, there's this idea of one thing becoming something else. Whether you're raising your awareness, your vibration, or changing your states of consciousness, or shifting your identity, one is always becoming something else, and it is through this becoming that the becoming is realized. It's kind of meta, and I'm going to get into that in my fourth point. But for now, what we want to look at is what is the shift happening. So when you study Kabbalah and you study something like the Tree of Life, it may look like an arbitrarily delineated worldview. And in some ways it kind of is, but that's only a superficial understanding. The Tree of Life, for example, divides all of creation into 10 numerical ideas, which is further expressed through the 22 paths that connect them all. So the Tree of Life can represent you, it could represent the cosmos, it could represent a creative process, but the thing to remember is that it's all emanating, it's all becoming. Every sphere on the Tree of Life is a shift between one thing and another thing, and the paths further express these movements. These delineations are not rigid and static, but it's more of a dynamic flow. As God said in the Torah, I will be what I will be. So let's use an example. Let's say you're studying the 32nd path of the Tree of Life, which is the path of Tav and is attributed to the tarot card, the World, the 22nd card. You might look at it and see this woman, and she might be dancing, maybe in a ring or a wreath or between two worlds, and you might say, oh, looks like Sophia or the Shekinah or whoever this goddess is, this woman, she's kind of dancing in limbo. But what's really going on is there's a shift between one state and another. And it's the shift between the 9th Sephira, Yesod, which is the astral plane, going into the 10th Sephira, Malkuth, the physical plane. Another way to look at this is it is the subconscious mind or autonomic nervous system that is connected with Yesod operating the physical body in Malkuth. When studying the material in this way, you start to more easily draw the connections between everything, and that is very important in my second and third point. The second concept to understand is correspondences. The third concept being union, and we'll get to there in a moment. So correspondences are very on brand for Western esotericism. They're pretty much an almost outmoded way of thinking, but the value of correspondences today have shifted, and I'm going to tell you why. But the general idea is you see one thing, that one thing is kind of similar to this other thing, so they must be connected. So by acting on the first thing, it may have an influence on the second thing, or vice versa. So I'll give you a fun example. My current hyperfixation is longboard dancing. So when you're on the longboard and you kind of dance, you move your feet on it while it's moving. And the other day, I could not for the life of me get this trick. So what I did was I meditated on Taurus. Taurus is the fixed earth sign of the zodiac. It's a very stable sign, very grounded, very balanced, very connected to the earth. And Taurus is also connected to the 16th path of the Tree of Life, which is the path of the Hebrew letter Vav. And the path of Vav takes the energy from Chokmah and brings it into Hesed. It takes the energy of Chokmah, which is this will force, this intention, this expansion, this power, and in some ways inspiration, and it brings it into Hesed, which is materialization and stability. And that's exactly what I was trying to do in my longboard practice. I was trying to take my inspiration, my excitement, my will, and stabilize it and balance it to do this trick. So meditating on Taurus and this path, and also the Hierophant tarot card, allowed me to do this. And this is just a very simple example that shows you the method of magic. Manipulating your world through associations and ideas, whether they exist within you or outside of you. But using correspondences like this to manipulate your own psyche and manipulate your own experience is only the beginning. There's a much less talked about phenomenon that goes on in the realm of correspondences. And that has to do with what the correspondences reveal outside of them. It has to do with our very capacity to make correspondences, to draw all these connections. So See, the more you draw connections and the more you observe yourself drawing connections and making meaning, the more you begin to reveal to yourself the meaning maker. The more you play with the operating system, the more you reveal to yourself the operator, and then you start to ask who is operating that operator. When you build an elaborate web of association, you start to see what's supporting that web. And that is where we enter the realms of high magic and mysticism. I'll use a Korzybski metaphor or saying and say, the map is not the territory. We have like the Tree of Life, Tarot, and other maps of consciousness, and they're not the territory, but they do show us what to look out for, what to be excited for, and they help us navigate this experience. But more deeply, what I would ask is, if you're making a map of a city, would the city be a city without someone creating these demarcations to make it so, and like making a map? So, does the map or does the city come first? This mutual arising dance leads us to our third key concept in the Hermetic Qabbalah, which is union. And union is really the central idea of all mysticism. We are all inching our way closer and closer to the unitive, indescribable experience of oneness. The complex web of correspondence is drawn by things like the Tree of Life and the Tarot. They all point in a holographic fashion to the one thing observing all of them all of the time. The deeper you go into the esoteric, the more you understand that the above and the below are all happening here. Union is the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is Aben in Hebrew. Aben takes two words and brings them together. Ab being father and Ben being son. So we might say that the stone is the union of father and son, the union of the above and the below, the macrocosm with the microcosm. These maps of reality, like the Tarot and the Tree of Life, through their fun and intricate correspondences and symbols, create this bridge between these two. It's like a sea of symbols all pointing to the one truth that is indescribable, but through which the symbols are describable. This is what the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart means when he talks about the ground of the soul being the same as the ground of God. It's like the same origin point. And this was obviously heretical for his time. It's really interesting to notice how similar his words are as Philo and Plotinus and the Kabbalists and the Hermeticists. And we run into kind of a fun situation here, because the idea that all is one, the fun cliche, can be a sort of toxic spiritual bypassing, but only if it's used as an escape or as a crutch. Usually the idea as a concept can become an attachment. It can become an identity. And when we don't identify with the idea, but experience the truth that the idea represents, that's a different story. In my opinion, if there's one thing to learn from Hermetic Qabbalah and mysticism in general, it's that everything is whole and made of the same stuff. The Tree of Life, for example, doesn't necessarily get us jumping from one reality to a completely separate reality through these glowing spheres of other dimensions. It's more like the more we navigate the Tree of Life, the closer we get to Keter, the more we realize the presence of Keter that already is. The source of it all is already here. And that leads me to my next and final point. Mysticism and Hermetic Qabbalah is meta. This one's really gonna bake your noodle. It's super fun. Let's get into it. So when I say the source is already here, it's already happening here right now, what I'm saying is everything is God. And yeah, you can crucify me in the comments, but it's like, at the end of the day, everything's God. And this isn't just Joe talking. This is like thousands and thousands of years of mystical literature and experiences, and my own personal experiences. Everything is literally God. You're God. I'm God. This is God. SpongeBob, God. Jeff Bezos, God. This YouTube video, God. All these things are God. Everything spoken is God, okay? Or source, or truth, or the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Whatever you want to say. We don't have to use the word God. We can use Brahma, we can use source. We could even say nothingness. You can take an atheistic approach or a nihilistic approach and say it's all nothingness, but you're saying the same thing. It's all semantics, okay? But when we say all of this is this truth, this indescribable, ineffable truth, oneness, as Plotinus would say, the one, the irony is it's all God, so how can we talk about God? So why in mysticism do we talk about God when we understand that it's all God anyway? Because mysticism breaks the rules. Mysticism is self-referential. This is the key point to understand. Not lowercase self-referential like the ego, the Joe in this and the you in this, the capital S self-referential. This is what the Vedanta means by stressing the idea that Atman is Brahman. So let's define metta for a moment. Metta is anything that's self-referential, anything that refers to itself from outside of itself. So for example, when I talk about this YouTube video, that's metta. So mysticism, being self-referential, is the experience or method to the experience of the ultimate ground of being, the ultimate truth becoming this. Or we could say this becoming, referring to the ultimate ground of being. The mystical experience is the awareness of outside of reality being this reality. But how can there be anything outside of reality? How can there be anything outside of God? How can it be metta? How can truth reveal itself from outside of itself? The answer is your life. And I'm definitely gonna have to make a part 2 to explain why, so if you wanna be notified on that, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because I've definitely went overboard in this video already. Thanks so much for watching. If this was fun for you, you can check out more stuff at tarotmysticismacademy.com. I have free classes, free downloads, and if this was really fun for you, share with a friend, family member, and definitely that eccentric coworker that you don't talk to. It is a great conversation starter. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next wormhole. Much love.